web architecture. Now, web architecture is made up of three essential elements. That's the website, that is the front end of a web application that is visible to the user. Then there's the server, which constitutes the back end of a web application and holds and manages all the data. And finally, there's the IP address, that is the address assigned to a website in order to be accessible on the internet. First up, let's have a look at what website is. So your browser starts by loading the main HTML file and then the CSS and JavaScript. The user interacts with the website and is not concerned with the backend of an application. Now, secondly, we have the server. Once you've developed your website, you'll have to host it on your server to make it accessible on the internet. Server, along with the database, contains all the data of a website and facilitates user interaction. Lastly, there's IP address, which is the third element of the web architecture. Now, website is hosted on an IP address. We put a domain name over that IP address the same way we put names over people's phone numbers. When you type a domain name in the browser, it will give you the server call. The server will then send over the website to you. Next, what is HTML? HTML is the most widely used markup language for developing and structuring web pages on the internet. It defines the structure of websites and formats these web pages. So what exactly is CSS then? Now, CSS is a simple design language used for making web pages look more beautiful and presentable. It can be attached to any HTML element to style it or even position it according to the developer's choice. Then you must be wondering, what exactly is JavaScript? Now, JavaScript is a powerful interpreted language targeted for web development. It is used for making web pages interactive and bringing the web pages to life. So now let's create your first website. Now, HTML, short for Hypertext Markup Language, is the coding standard for documents designed for web browsers, consisting of a series of elements or tags, and which can be used to structure a web page, right? So these elements can include headings, paragraphs, div containers, tables, and more. HTML tags are nested, meaning there are opening and closing tags with the content in between those tags. So now let's write a simple HTML code that will help you understand the basics of the language. So for this, I'm using the text editor, that is Visual Studio Code. You can go ahead and download this text editor from their official website. So here I've created a simple .html file in my VS Code and I've added the initial HTML files. Now let me explain to you one by one. Now, doc type is not so much of a tag, but it is more of an instruction. Now, this indicates the browser that the document type to be served to the user is in fact an HTML document. Now, this doc type instruction should always be included at the very top of your HTML page. Next up, you have the HTML tag that is used to contain all the web page's HTML code. Right? So it contains an opening and closing tag with contents in between them. The HTML tag can also have attributes. Now, for example, there's the lang attribute allowing you to specify the spoken language of the contents of the page. Followed by the HTML tag, there's the head tag. Now, this is the first section of the code that contains all of the information about the web page's properties, links, and more. It could have page's title, description, additional meta tags, and CSS code. So here I've used the title tag, and let's give a title, say HTML in 10 minutes. Alright. You can also add CSS to the head tag by using the style tag and change the display styles of HTML elements that are being used. The next section is the body tag. The body tag contains all the displayable contents of your web page, including headings, paragraphs, div containers, tables, and more. Now, the HTML header tags are used to add headings to a web page. There are several types of headings available for developers to add to a web page, right? So first up, let's have a look at them. I'm going to create a simple h1 heading tag, and the message I'm displaying is, this is the first heading. Alright. After this, I'm going to add a paragraph tag which creates padding in the top and bottom of the element to help separate the text between each paragraph, right? So I'm gonna add a p tag and say this is the paragraph tag. After this, let me add a simple h2 tag, which is another heading tag, and say this is the second heading. You can also add line breaks, which are helpful from time to time. If you want to provide a single line break in your content, you can do so by adding the PR tag. So here, let me just add one for better understanding. Now the HTML div tag defines a division or a section in an HTML document that is used as a container for other HTML elements. Now these elements can include content areas, sidebars, page headers, footers, etc. This tag is used to apply styles to HTML elements that cannot be added otherwise. We can also make use of the HTML image tag to add images to a web page. Now these images in a web page are a very common sight and they can make the website look more attractive. So for that we can use the image tag. So I say img, within which I mention the source. I'm adding the HTML logo, so let me just mention that here. And then I'm going to provide width for it and then a specific height. Alright, so when you save the file and when you look at the browser, you can see that the first heading is displayed, then your paragraph tag is displayed, followed by the second heading and then the image. Now let me show you how you can add styles for some of these headings and paragraph tags. So here in my first heading tag, let me just say styles and let me change the font of the content that is being displayed. I'm going to change it to career new. And for my paragraph tag, let me display the content in italics. So I'll say font style and make it italics. So let me save this and when I look at the browser, you can see that the font has changed and so has the font style here. So now we've covered a few important HTML tags used to develop a web page. Now there are many other tags available for almost everything you'd want to add to a web page. Now all of these are available on the internet for you and you can use them on your website.
In this tutorial, we are going to learn about the classes and ID in the HTML and how to use them. So without further ado, let's get started. So what is an HTML class? An HTML class attribute is used to specify a single or multiple class names for an HTML element. The class name can be used by CSS and JavaScript to do some tasks for HTML element. We can also use this class in the CSS with a specific class with the period character followed by the name of the class first selecting element. So let's jump onto the demo to understand the classes and ID better. So we are on a Sublime Text Editor. Let's add the standard boilerplate of HTML. We give the title as classes and ID in HTML. Let's start with a basic example. We'll see how to define an HTML class. So inside the body tag, we'll add one h1 and we'll give this class name of head1. We'll add some text here. This is the heading 1. I can copy this part because we'll need it enough for the line. So for the h2, this will be the heading 2. For h3, see we have used the same class name in all our H1, H2, H3 and H4. So if you save the file and go to the page and refresh, you'll see the headings are there on the page. This is the heading 1, heading 2, heading 3 and heading 4. Now let's learn how we can use this class name for our styling purpose. So we'll open the style tag here and you will mention the class name by period followed by the class name. So head 1, open the parenthesis and let's set the color to light cyan and we'll set the font family to set to it cursive. Keep the background color to black. Okay, so you can see we have mentioned the class name dot head 1 for styling purposes and we have given the color, font family and background color for it. So just save the file and go back. Refresh. And you can see we have designed this H1, H2, H3 and H4 using our class tag. Now let's use another example with a different class name. So here only we'll make the changes. Let's name this class as H2, this H3 and let it be H4. Now you can style them separately. For the head 2, we can set the color, say light pink, and we can set the font background color to red. Okay. Now similarly for the H3 dot H3, set the color to I don't know what color. Let's say Lisa. Set the background color to let's say blue. Okay, save the file and go back to the page. Now you can see we have designed our H1, H2, H3 and H4 using the different class names. Here is an example of using the multiple classes on the same code. Now one thing you should note that each class name must be separated by the space. There are few points you should know while working with the class. So the first one will be the class attribute can be used on any HTML element. Like any HTML element can have a class name. The second point will be the class name is a case sensitive. Head 1 and if we change here to say we keep it big and capital, this will be wrong. The style won't be implemented on the page. Now if you refresh, you can see the style is not implemented. So the class name is a case sensitive. Let's change this back. Refresh and now you can see our design is back. So this was all about HTML classes. Now let's move on to the ID attribute. So the HTML ID attribute is used to specify the unique ID for an element of the HTML document. It allocates the unique identifier which is used with the CSS and a JavaScript for performing certain tasks. In cascading style sheet, that is CSS, we mention an element with a specific ID by using the hash symbol followed by the ID. So let's work on an example to understand this better. So we use the same previous example. We mention the H1 and this time we use the ID. So ID and we'll name it as head 1. This is the first heading. For H2 also, we'll mention the ID name as head 1 only. Head 1. The second heading. Now, to style the heading, we go back here, we open the style tab, and we'll use the hash symbol to mention the ID. Hash head 1. Open the parenthesis, and set the color to light green. We'll set the font family to cursor, and we'll set the background color black. Okay. Save the file and go back and refresh. So you can see this works in a similar manner to the class. Apart from it, that we use the hash symbol to mention the ID name. So now let's change the example and use the different ID names for different H1s. So this can be H1, this can be H2. Let's add one more. We'll name it as ID H3. Okay. So we'll style the let's put it to red for H3. Let's put it to yellow. Let's use green. Okay. Save the file, go back and refresh. Now you can see we have the different style for different ID. So in this way you can use the different ID to design your HTML page.